Hello lady, just the one, and gentlemen ages 13 to 17 pretending to be 18 to 24-year-olds. My name is Xenomite, and I'm still avoiding playing Team Fortress 2. Instead, I've been discussing social issues for the past couple weeks. This is because, to be genuinely honest, the biggest issue with TF2 in regards to its current gameplay is that casual is still kind of a mess, and that the number of actual fixes that have actually resolved much of anything can be counted on one hand. At this point, the fact that it's been 10 months since many of these issues were unnecessarily implemented has me at my wit's end. I'm sick of talking about casual. I'm sick of using casual. Supposedly, casual functions best on the west coast of the US, but I don't exactly live there, so that means I'm completely fucked. I'm sick of playing this game because it can take up to 30 minutes or more to get into a match that isn't a stomp fest, a cheat fest, or completely empty. Despite the fact that I love the core gameplay loop of TF2 more than any other game, it's not worth 30 minutes and my sanity to play it. Although, to be fair, the update that launched a few days ago certainly resolved quite a few issues with casual as I knew it. However, it's still flawed, and that update was long overdue. I wrote this script before that update came out. I hate Valve, they always do this. There's a reason I only boot up TF2 anymore for comp scrims and streams, and it's because TF2's outer shell of systems, casual and comp, are ruining the core gameplay for me. But that made me think about the people who are essentially the polar opposite of that. People who love the peripheral systems of TF2 but aren't necessarily so keen on the core gameplay. People that love trading, being friendly, etc. This line of thought eventually brought me to the conclusion that I often talk about the issues of people who enjoy the inner shell of core gameplay in TF2, but never the issues of the peripheral gameplay users, and that to some degree their complaints are equally as valid. Unfortunately, Valve simply isn't doing enough to prevent these issues from impacting these users' enjoyment of the game in a big way. In the past, I've discussed the issue of cheating in TF2 and how to solve it. And now, I want to find something that nearly parallels cheating in the trading community. This is because the actions are perpetrated by another individual underhandedly and often ruin the fun of trading for others, which is absolutely understandable. If you can tell by the title of this video, the topic of today is clearly the problem of scamming and stealing virtual items and other things worth real monetary value. And I want to discuss how the fault of that scam falls on two people. It is both the thief's fault for acting in the way that they do, and it is the victim's fault for falling prey to it. I will also address how Valve could possibly prevent scammers from stealing, and about how the potential victim can avoid the pitfalls. Typically, I wouldn't discuss how to avoid said pitfalls, but to be genuinely honest, we both know Valve isn't about to lift a finger to actually resolve any issues in this game without at least a couple of court cases beforehand. They're too busy looking at sensitive images of women on their VR headsets while rolling in slightly damp spooge money. Last but not least, I am also going to address the psychology and the mentality behind thievery, because I feel it will shed light on how to better combat it, both from the perspective of Valve and from the victim.
Paint your grandma's portrait, learn to sign the alphabet. Day is almost over with, now's the time to salvage it.
If you've been a viewer of my content for the last couple of months, you'll notice that I recently have discussed cheating, as aforementioned, and how people can mentally parse if it's worthwhile to cheat in TF2 via a system of risk versus reward, especially if the stakes are low. Something I didn't address in that previous video, however, is the justification, because to be genuinely honest in regards to cheating in a video game, justification is moot. If you're a cheater, the worst you're doing is ruining someone else's mood, typically. On average, this won't negatively impact the self-perception of the person who is cheating. It isn't particularly impactful in the grand scheme of life. However, the stakes are much higher when the offense is in regards to theft. People inherently justify their own actions, simply due to the fact that no one will ever truly consider themselves an unjustifiable monster. People invariably view themselves as either the protagonist or the sympathetic antagonist. There are no in-betweens, which means that they must justify to themselves that the thievery they commit isn't as bad as it seems, while in reality they could potentially be stealing what someone is using to pay the bills. Like it or not, these virtual items are a real currency, and what scammers do is outright theft. These items can be worth a great deal of wealth in-game and can be easily transferred into real-world cash via services like marketplace.tf. I would know. I recently made the equivalent of a free paycheck by selling one of my unusuals. The highest tiers of unusuals can even purchase a car. Scamming clearly isn't a little thing, and it scales proportionally to the price of an item. Now, I'm not about to make a blanket claim for all people who thieve in TF2. No two people think alike. But I'm willing to bet that the vast majority of people who consider scamming items in TF2 judge their actions to be primarily harmless because the items are virtual and therefore hold no value, or that there is no loss or a lesser loss on behalf of the victim. Of course, we know this to simply not be true. Items translate into cash and cash can translate into items. theft of virtual items should be treated in the same way that theft of physical objects or currency is treated under the law, but that's not exactly possible. We'll cover this later. There are absolutely some places where the law lags behind, and one of those places is typically the internet. This, however, brings me on to the next point about risk versus reward and how to prevent people from feeling like scamming or theft of these items isn't worth the inherent risk. No matter what the justification is, for someone to do something, they must believe that the potential benefit outweighs the potential risk. However, it is unbelievably easy to sway this in the favor of not being worthwhile, given that the negativity bias is in full swing. If you don't know what the negativity bias is, Google is right up there at the top of your browser. I have explained this concept more times than I care to count across my most recent videos, and I'm not willing to do it again. However, Valve, to some degree, is failing to make the potential risk outweigh the potential benefits of scamming. But unlike in the case of cheating, the community is able to pick up the slack where Valve is dropping the ball. In many aspects, Valve is too lenient with their judgments on scamming. They review every case with Steam support and will ban proven scammers from everything trading related for a period of time. However, the length of the ban is presumably determined by the number of offenses committed and how severe the said offenses were. For many low-tier offenses, such as the scamming of low-tier hats, typically have bans within the range of a couple weeks to months, while more severe theft can lead up to a permanent ban. Bans of a couple weeks or months are much more common because more people own cheap unusuals in this range of approximately 10 to 15-ish keys, and many people are uneducated about how to defend themselves against a scam. People are also inherently less defensive the less monetary value is on the line. I apologize that most of the prior knowledge was fairly vague, given that Steam wants to make sure as little information is released to the public on their methodology. This is to make sure that people who do scam can't use this information in order to better dodge their punishment. For most shorter bans, however, the ban is moot. The scam is over. The perpetrator has gotten away with whatever profits they've gleaned, which means that the community is here to make sure that they can't truly profit, or their ability to profit in a monetary value has been heavily damaged via systems like SteamRep. SteamRep gives an account the attribute of scammer provided they are reported with evidence. This attribute can be transferred to other accounts who knowingly trade and benefit the initial scammer for his illegitimate activities. This ban more or less means that educated people in trading aren't going to trade with you. Scrap.tf and Marketplace.tf will not do business with you, etc, etc. However, if you were paying attention to the previous few sentences, you'll notice that the most operative portion in combating thievery and scams is being an educated person, which I'm about to do now.
I hate buses, I hate buses.
Well, I've made it abundantly clear that it's unlikely Valve will do anything directly about stopping people from scamming, beyond what they've already done. Valve generally prefers a hands-off methodology. This is why things like Steam Greenlight were implemented, so they aren't required to manually police their own systems. Following Steam Greenlight, the same issue I'm sure will persist in Steam Direct. But beyond that, in context to trading, this is the same reason they applied systems like trade holds and two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication will protect you from most automated trading scams via hijacking programs, but it can't save you from your own complicit stupidity. Thankfully, there are several very good resources about how to keep yourself educated on who is potentially a scammer or attempting to steal your items via coercion. The two most notable ones would be the guidelines that Steam actually has to better defend yourself and the guidelines that Steam Rep uses to dictate if someone is potentially a thief or scammer. Even better yet, I'm willing to bet that the vast majority of incidents can be prevented simply by copying someone's Steam URL and pasting it into the Steam Rep search bar. Just remember, never be complicit with trusting people. If something isn't right or breaks one of the general guidelines in the previous threads, just block them. It's not worth the risk. Don't click links they send you. Don't download things they send you. To some degree, don't even go to servers they invite you to. For trades involving money or cashing out, I would recommend going through Marketplace.tf. The 10% commission is a worthwhile trade for the security and safety, especially if the person you're trading with doesn't have a well-established history and rep. If the person is legit, they won't object to using Marketplace.tf, especially because the 10% fee is comped on the seller, not the buyer. However, in an ideal world, people wouldn't attempt to steal from others. Thankfully, that ideal future isn't actually entirely improbable, nor is it impossible. Valve or another third party would need to be more active in prevention of thievery of this caliber, especially in cases of higher tier unusuals being unboxed and stolen. Scamming and stealing of items worth real monetary value is a crime. In an ideal situation, Valve would escalate this to court or to help provide information, so to better hold a court case against these individuals who cheat and steal. You would be a fool to believe that Valve doesn't have access to a great deal of your information and your history on Steam. Scamming is a crime worthy of potentially time in prison and restitution with added fines, at least in the US. All it would take is one well-publicized, conclusive court case to truly prove that there are potentially extremely harsh repercussions for their actions and to prevent many potential would-be thieves of virtual items. Most importantly, however, the court case would set a precedent for the future in many other court cases. Unfortunately, Valve, as aforementioned, dislikes taking a hands-on approach, and us as a consumer base are powerless to make them help us. Typically, in order to make Valve police their trading system of real translatable currency, we as a consumer would need a class action lawsuit. A class action lawsuit is a lawsuit in which a group of people with the same or similar injuries caused by the same product or action sue the defendant as a group. But a quick peruse through the Steam end user license agreement that you agreed to, without reading, mind you, reveals that you are prohibited from holding a class action lawsuit against Valve. So, unless Valve has a dramatic, sudden change of heart, or someone takes a scammer to court without Valve's help in finding their identity, in the end, we as a consumer base are moderately SOL. Speaking of less legitimate options, my name is Xenomite, and you just spent the last 15-ish minutes listening to a pretentious jerk when you could be watching funnier people discuss less serious topics. I'd like to thank my girlfriend who peer edits and reviews my scripts, and I'd like to thank you for watching this video. I'd also genuinely appreciate it if you'd support me on Patreon. Paying rent is nice, and here's a read of all $5 plus patrons. Alright, and for this week, our $5 patrons plus are Puff Dreamer, Future Designer, Panicky Guy, Gary D. Alonzo Jr., Daniela Treat, and Kenta. We also have Happy Purple, Random Crits, Sonic TDM, Zombie Plastic Clock, Palex, Beep Boop, and BB. Fair note though, guys, I have recently changed how my Patreon payment thing works. Now, the moment that you sign up to be a patron, you get charged immediately. Sorry, I've had a pretty major issue with people pulling out on patrons. However, that does remove the need for me to wait until the first of the month to actually give rewards. So the moment that you sign up now, you immediately get your reward, but you're also immediately charged. Anyway, I'd like to thank you guys for donating and for supporting my channel. It does mean a lot. Adios. Thank you.
You said you hate me, here's how I feel.
This record is specially designed to teach any healthy, normal parakeet to talk by using a scientific new method that is acknowledged to be far superior.